Hi guys, how you doing today? This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. I'm happy for each and every one of you to be here today. I'm going to go ahead and take this off of my ears. I was just kind of getting some things together, but I don't necessarily need to wear it because I'm not playing any music or anything right now. So I'm going to talk about one of the hottest topics going on in YouTube right now, and it's my boy Kwame Brown. And I know I've kind of waited a little long to talk about it on my Life Solutions channel. Although if you want to hear about me talking about Kwame Brown, I did bring up some things on my D. Durrell the Rebirth channel if you'd like to hear commentary about that. My topic today is how Kwame Brown could no longer repress or use repression of his emotions as it involves his view of the media. Now, repression, if people want to understand what repression is the ability to either slow down or avoid thinking about thoughts and feelings that, to me, have a negative effect on you. Sometimes in the psychology of human beings, things that have had a defined imprint on our life that yields pain, suffering, fear, stress, and so on can be so profound that our brain intentionally prevents it from surfacing again into our reality. Therefore, that's why repression is a defense mechanism that is talked about as preventing you from thinking about thoughts, feelings, or behaviors, events, and so on that can trigger a negative effect on you. Okay, so what our brain does is what our brain does is it indirectly prevents it from coming up on purpose so that you don't have to go back to that situation. Look, it happened in the past. Your brain is in some way trying to protect you emotionally from experiencing pain or experiencing tragedy or trauma because it understands it can evoke certain behaviors and things that could be detrimental to you. Okay, so it wants to try to keep things in order because it knows that if you start thinking about the trauma that happened to you at 5 years old, you may go out of control and do things that are somewhat negative. Okay, or you may react in a way that is not typical of yourself. So for 20 years, guys, Kwame Brown repressed his feelings and his thoughts about people like Stephen A. Smith, Fox Sports, ESPN, that always used him as the poster boy for being a bust in the NBA. Now I don't talk about sports a whole lot, and I'm not going to talk about sports a whole lot on this channel, but in this particular situation, I want you all to understand, for those that don't follow sports, Kwame Brown was from South Carolina. He was the number one pick in 2001. He was nearly 7 foot. He was supposed to be this big time phenom. He was the first time a high school player was ever chosen number one overall. He was the first high school player ever to be chosen number one overall. To be honest with you, I remember when Kwame Brown was first drafted, I thought they were making a mistake. I did not think he was deserving, even though they were basing it on potential, but I thought it was a big risk of drafting a player at the number one as being, when you draft number one, that means you think this person is the best player in the draft. And I don't think he had enough experience, nor was the competition that I think he played against in high school was strong enough to take that big of a risk. And they did. The Washington Wizards took a hell of a risk, and it failed. And the problem is that Kwame Brown really should have went to college for at least 1 year, to be honest with you. He needed more experience. That level of what he played in high school was not conducive to just catapulting you into the NBA. No, it wasn't. And there are tons of other high school players that got drafted that didn't make it, even though they're not talked about a lot. Then there are tons of high school players that thought they were going to get drafted and didn't get drafted. So with that being said and that understanding, Kwame Brown is not a bust because he played in the league for damn near almost 12 years. A bust usually doesn't make it in a year. No, doesn't make it past maybe 3 or 4 years at the most. No, definitely no more than 5 years. Just like Adam Morrison, who got drafted in the first round out of Gonzaga back maybe a few years after he did, and he flopped. He didn't last 2 or 3 years in the league. And there's other people, countless others, that didn't last. But with that being said, Kwame Brown was in a bad situation with bad owner, bad GM, a la Michael Jordan, who was not deserving of being a GM, regardless of his feats as a player. They ruined his confidence. To be honest with you, did Kwame Brown have the talent to be possibly a lotto pick? Yes, he did. He had the talent, but it was developing talent. He was only 17 years old when he got drafted. He played the league when he was damn near barely 18. He lacked the experience, the exposure, and he was not mentally strong enough. They treated this man this young boy, as if he was 23, 24, 25 years old. He was 18, who grew up in a small town, lack of exposure of life. He was not mentally ready for the NBA. He had the physical talent. He was not mentally ready, and he shouldn't have been. Matter of fact, they should have basically not played him his first year at all. He should have never played. He should have been on the bench practicing and learning the NBA game for 1 whole year, and then we're going to play you your second year. That's what should have been done. Mentally, he was not ready for the NBA, but they didn't want to do that. They didn't worry about they expected him to come in and play like a number 1 pick 2 or 3 years out of college. That's what they expected, and it didn't happen. So I blame the front office for lack of knowing how to develop and deal with a kid 18 years old entering into the league. You should have been prepared to understand you cannot treat this like you would treat any other player that played a few years in the European leagues or played 2 or 3 years in college. But at least at college you have exposure to media, you have exposure to other players who are potentially NBA players that could have been used as a stepping stone to get there. Okay? Kwame Brown did not have that. He went from performing in high school gyms that may have had a couple of thousand people at best on a good night, to now you're around hundreds of thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people on an NBA night, and you're being viewed around the world by millions of people. That's a big difference. He was not ready for that. So Kwame Brown, through all of the criticism, never said one word to the media. He never was disrespectful to anybody, to the media. He could have wrote blogs. He could have tweeted. He could have been on social media even towards the latter half of his career, and talked crazy to people about how they were speaking ill of him and his ability to play basketball. He chose not to. He kept quiet. He repressed feelings in which I feel that Kwame Brown definitely, and I'm not diagnosing him or saying whatever, but it's obvious to me that in his discussions of expressing about his career, that this affected him. This brother could have potentially experienced depression. He definitely had anxiety of the fact of how to interact with people like Michael Jordan and people he idolized, and just being on eggshells, the stress of going to work, hostile work environment for an 18-year-old, not understanding how to function in the NBA. Okay? The brother never really developed into what he should have because his foundation was screwed up. Because he did not understand NBA offenses, he didn't understand how to play NBA defense. He just basically was a tall big kid that had a lot of talent. But the people around him thought he was just supposed to just fit in and make it work. No, you can't do that to 18-year-olds. To be honest with you, Kwame Brown would have benefited from a coach who had a better temperament than Doug Collins. He would have benefited from a coach and other coaches who probably had a college background of coaching kids his age and how to reach and communicate with them. At least one or more persons on that staff that had a extensive college basketball experience prior to going to the NBA. I think that would have benefited him because they're used to working with kids his age, as opposed to NBA players are typically around 22, 23 years of age and up. That's a big difference. It's a difference between coaching a kid 22, 23 as opposed to you 17, barely 18 years old, or barely making 18. That's a big difference. It's a big difference in how their emotions run, how they decipher things, how they pick up things, and how they socialize. You know, and kids at that age have a little bit more experience to handle that. So he repressed these things. He had anxiety, lack of self-confidence, probably had issues of just dealing with whether or not he belonged in the league, second guessing himself. He was never, I don't think he naturally was able to just be himself, as he discussed, because he had to try to please everybody. And he had so much pressure on him. He probably did not have the proper coping skills or even had a therapist. I don't know whether or not he had a therapist or not, but I think it would have benefited him to have a therapist, to have a team, a sports psychologist or someone that could help him deal with the issues that he was dealing with, because it was more of a mental thing, and it was also the fact that he was in a hostile work environment around people like Michael Jordan and Doug Collins that didn't know what the hell they were doing as far as coaching this type of kid. They assumed he was going to be like any other NBA kid out of college that had prior coaching and probably played on a level that's a step or two below the NBA, as opposed to coming out of high school. He was just not mentally ready. Okay, so he repressed those feelings, and then till finally he became the butt of many jokes. You had people like Stephen A. Smith and others who called Kwame Brown the biggest bust ever, and he wasn't. There were bigger busts than him. Even at the number one spot, there are people that played in the number one that were number one picks that didn't do squat in the NBA. Plenty of them. Okay, and so finally he said, "What the hell with it? Look, he's now 38 years old. He's a grown ass man, and he's like, I'm not going to allow myself to be bullied. I'm not going to allow people to give their side and expect me just to shut up and allow people to say negative things about me." So Kwame Brown broke the repressive state. His state of repression lasted for damn near 20 years because he never spoke to the media. He never spoke to anybody about this issue, about being a bust. And then finally he said, "I had enough. I'm not going to allow you to say things about me and not strike back." Now everybody's mad that he struck back. But when you put a cat into a corner, that door starts scratching. Turn their face and start scratching. You put him in a corner where all he can do is fight back. So now deal with it. You're surprised? Are you surprised? Would you have not acted the same way? Matter of fact, I'm surprised he waited this long, because I'm like, why are we still talking about Kwame Brown? I mean, he hadn't played in the league in 9 years. Why are we talking about him? There's plenty other busts that happened between 2011 and 2021 that you could call a bust. Okay? Let's be honest. There are plenty of busts to go around. So those repressive feelings, repression can be a very tricky thing, because if a person can no longer repress things, that could be a situation where a person can be very volatile. Kwame Brown has been deemed as being very volatile because of the emotions, because it came pouring out like a volcano. And it reeked all over social media because people were surprised that he was going to respond in the manner that he did. He cursed a bunch of people out. He yelled, screamed, cursed, spoke his mind. He didn't give a damn about what anybody thought or stated. Then it reached into the national news, reached the national news where they commented on it. But he had to right to defend himself, and I totally support Kwame Brown on his decision to do so. So please tell me what you think about the repressive state that Kwame Brown was in. I've kind of discussed and gave definition of what repression is as a defense mechanism of a person necessarily as you subconsciously or unconsciously suppressing. I'm not going to say suppressing, but preventing yourself from feeling a certain or thinking a certain way due to events that have occurred. And I'm going to be honest with you. Particularly with Stephen A. Smith, he went overboard many times about Kwame Brown. Many times. And he kept his mouth closed and didn't say one word. And he decided he couldn't do it anymore. So things happen the way they are. Also with repression, you also got to understand your state of mind. Your state of mind is important. Kwame Brown, state of mind was taken back to when he was 18. Was taken back. It was taken back to when he was that age. Because a lot of times with repression, it also can mean you going back to a state of being, state of mind. Kwame Brown has now gotten to a point where he thinks about when he was 18. He's thinking about when he was out of high school. All of that was repression. Not the fact that he was kind of holding down his emotion, but the fact of his thought process went back to 18, 19, 20 in his NBA career. This man's 38 years old now. But he repressed that for so many years that he couldn't do it anymore. So, again, guys, I hope you liked the discussion. This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. Have a great day.